I remember that winter as a quiet blur, the kind where days melted into each other and nights felt heavier than they should. I had just finished college, yet life didn't feel like it was beginning. It felt paused, as if everyone else was running toward something while I stood still. My apartment was small, silent, and the kind of lonely that hummed even when the lights were on. Most of my friends had scattered into new jobs, new cities, new people. Only Sophie remained, my anchor to the familiar chaos of youth. When she called one Thursday afternoon, her voice was its usual sunshine. "You've been hiding from the world again, haven't you?" she teased. I laughed, even though she wasn't wrong. Then she said, "Come stay at my place for the weekend. Mom's been asking about you." I hesitated for a moment. It had been months since I'd visited her house, that big quiet place tucked in the suburbs, the one that always smelled faintly of jasmine and freshly brewed coffee. "I don't want to intrude," I said. "Don't be ridiculous, Elina, you're family. Pack your bag and come tomorrow." And so I did. The next evening, the city gave way to tree-lined roads and dim golden streetlights as I made my way to Sophie's home. By the time I reached, dusk had already settled. The porch light glowed softly, and when the door opened, there she was, Mrs. Clara, Sophie's mother. Clara wasn't the kind of woman you could easily describe. She wasn't just beautiful, she had presence. Tall, graceful, and composed, with streaks of silver through her dark hair that only made her seem more radiant. Her voice was calm, almost melodic, the kind that seemed to slow the world around it. "Elina," she said, smiling in recognition. "It's been too long. You've grown into such a lovely young woman." Her words lingered a moment longer than they should have. Maybe it was the warmth in her tone, or the softness in her eyes. But something about her made me feel seen, in a way that was unfamiliar yet oddly comforting. Sophie appeared from behind her, pulling me into a hug. Finally, my best friend decided to remember I exist. Dinner that night was laughter and nostalgia served in warm bowls. We talked about our college days, our bad habits, and the silly things that had once felt like the end of the world. Clara mostly listened, smiling gently, occasionally adding a remark that made both of us laugh harder. But every now and then, when the conversation drifted away from her, I caught a glimpse of something else. A flicker of quiet sadness in her eyes, the kind people hide too well. After dinner, Sophie excused herself to take a call. I stayed back to help clear the table, but Clara shook her head. "You're the guest, dear. Sit down, I'll manage." "I don't mind helping," I said, picking up the plates anyway. She smiled, that slow, appreciative kind of smile, and for a second it felt like time stopped between us. "Thank you, Elina," she said softly. My name and her voice felt different, delicate, intentional. Later that night, rain began tapping gently against the windows. The sky had turned a shade of blue so deep it almost looked endless. Sophie yawned dramatically and declared she was going to bed. "Mom, make sure Elina doesn't leave," she said, laughing. "It's pouring out there, and the buses stopped running an hour ago." Before I could protest, Clara turned to me. "She's right. You'll stay the night, dear. The guest room's ready." "I don't want to be a bother." "Nonsense," she said, cutting me off with a kind firmness that made refusal impossible. "It's settled." She led me down the quiet hallway to a small, cozy room with cream-colored curtains and a single lamp glowing on the bedside table. "If you need anything," she said, pausing at the doorway, "my room's just across the hall." "Thank you," I murmured. She nodded, that same gentle smile brushing her lips before she left. I sat on the bed, listening to the rain thicken outside. The room felt safe but strange, like stepping into someone else's memory. I lay there for hours, unable to sleep. I kept thinking about the way she'd said my name, the way her eyes seemed to hold both strength and sorrow. It wasn't attraction, at least not the kind I could understand. It was more like a pull, a gravity born of two lonely hearts recognizing each other without words. From the other side of the hallway, I heard faint footsteps, then the sound of a door closing softly. For a moment, I wondered if she couldn't sleep either. As the rain whispered against the windows and the clock ticked its slow rhythm, I closed my eyes, unaware that this night, this simple invitation to stay, would become the turning point of everything I thought I knew about love, loneliness, and the quiet ache of connection. And somewhere between the thunder and my heartbeat, I realized something had already begun to change. The rain hadn't stopped all night. It tapped against the windows like a restless heartbeat, soft and steady, echoing through the quiet house. Sophie had fallen asleep hours ago. I could hear her light snoring from the room next door, but my eyes refused to close. The darkness didn't feel heavy, just alive. Something about that house carried a warmth I couldn't shake, as if memories lingered in its walls, whispering when everyone else had fallen silent. After another hour of turning in bed, I gave up on sleep. I slipped out from under the blanket, careful not to make a sound, and opened the door. The hallway was dim, lit only by the faint silver of the moon slipping through the curtains. The air smelled faintly of rain and something floral, jasmine maybe, the same scent that always seemed to follow Clara. I padded quietly down the stairs, half expecting emptiness. But when I reached the kitchen, I froze. There she was. Clara sat at the small wooden table by the window, wrapped in a light shawl, a steaming cup of tea cradled in her hands. The soft light from the stove lamp brushed across her face, catching the glint of the silver in her hair. She looked peaceful and lonely. She noticed me before I could speak. "Couldn't sleep?" Her voice was quiet, low, the kind that felt like a secret shared between two people. I smiled awkwardly. "Not really. I didn't mean to bother you." "You're not bothering me." She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Come, tea?" I nodded and she poured another cup. The soft clink of porcelain and the steady sound of the rain outside filled the silence between us. When I sat down, I realized how calm I felt, as if I'd been meant to find her there. "Do you often stay up this late?" I asked. She exhaled softly, her eyes fixed on the steam rising from her cup. "Sometimes. The house feels too quiet when everyone's asleep. I suppose I've gotten used to the noise of life. And when it's gone, the silence keeps me awake." There was something in the way she said it, something raw and unguarded. I tilted my head. "Does that happen often?" She gave a faint, sad smile. "More than I'd like. Sophie's father left when she was young. I've had plenty of quiet nights since then." I didn't know what to say, so I just listened. The rain grew louder, tapping faster against the glass. "I'm sorry," I finally said. "Don't be." She looked at me then, her gaze gentle but unwavering. "We survive, Elina. That's what women do, even when the world forgets how much we give." Her words struck something deep in me. I'd always thought of Clara as unshakable, elegant, strong, untouchable. But here she was, speaking softly, her armor resting beside her cup of tea. "You sound like you've carried a lot," I said quietly. She smiled again, eyes warm. "And you sound like you understand what that feels like." I hesitated. Maybe it was the late hour, or the storm outside, or the way her voice wrapped around my name. But suddenly I wanted to tell her everything. "I think I do," I said. "I've always felt misplaced, I guess. I try to fit into things, jobs, friendships, even relationships, but I never quite do. People like me for a while, then they move on, and I'm left wondering if I said or did something wrong. I've never really been understood." The words spilled out before I could stop them. Clara didn't interrupt. She just listened, really listened, with her whole presence. Her eyes never left mine. It was unnerving and comforting all at once. "I don't think it's you," she said softly. "You just feel too deeply for a world that prefers the shallow." The lights flickered then, once, twice, and went out completely. For a moment, we both froze. Then Clara stood, calm as ever, and reached for a drawer. She lit a candle, the flame catching quickly, casting a golden glow across her face. The room transformed, softer, warmer. The rain outside seemed to fade to a hush. She set the candle between us. The light danced across her features, her steady eyes, her faint smile, the tiny crease between her brows. "You have such an honest heart, Elina," she whispered. "It shows in your eyes," I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. "No one's ever said that to me before." "They should have," she said simply. For a long while, we just sat there, the rain our only witness. There was no need for more words. I could feel her understanding me in a way that didn't need to be spoken. It wasn't about attraction, not yet. It was about recognition. Two souls that had been walking through different kinds of loneliness, finding each other by accident in the quietest hour of the night. I caught myself staring at her, at the way the candlelight softened the lines around her mouth, the way her fingers curled around her cup. She looked up, and our eyes met again, just for a heartbeat too long. I looked away first, pretending to sip my tea, my pulse unsteady. Eventually, she said softly, "You should try to rest. Tomorrow will come too quickly." I nodded, standing up, my legs feeling strangely weak. "Good night, Clara." "Good night, dear," she said, her voice low, almost tender. As I walked back upstairs, the candlelight behind me flickered one last time. Morning came with a soft hum of light spilling through the curtains, the kind that gently wakes you rather than demands you to rise. For a moment, I forgot where I was. The walls, the faint smell of jasmine, the distant sound of clinking dishes downstairs. Then it all returned. The rain, the candlelight, Clara's voice echoing in the quiet kitchen. I sat up, my heart already uneasy. It felt like something in me had shifted overnight, not broken, not built, just changed. Sophie's laughter carried faintly up the stairs. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to steady myself before stepping out of the guest room. The house was alive again, the warmth of morning replacing the intimacy of last night. Still, beneath the sunlight, everything felt charged, as if some invisible thread still connected me to what had passed between us. When I entered the kitchen, Clara was standing by the stove, her hair loosely tied, sleeves rolled to her elbows as she flipped pancakes. Sophie sat at the counter scrolling through her phone. "Morning, sleepyhead," Sophie teased, grinning. "I thought you'd miss breakfast entirely." I smiled faintly. "Guess the rain made me too cozy." Clara turned slightly, meeting my eyes. "Good morning, Elina." Her tone was calm, almost too calm, but her gaze lingered, just for a breath longer than it should have. The sunlight streaming in through the window caught the side of her face, and I found myself noticing the smallest things. The soft curl of her hair at her neck, the way she hummed under her breath as she worked. Breakfast passed in light chatter. Sophie talked about her friends, weekend plans, and a new movie she wanted to watch. I tried to laugh in the right places, but my thoughts kept drifting back to the night before. The glow of the candle, the sound of Clara saying my name. Every time I glanced her way, I caught the faintest hint of something mirrored in her expression. Restraint, maybe. Or remembering. After we finished, Sophie stood and stretched. "I promised Lily I'd meet her at the cafe. Won't be long. You two will be okay without me, right?" "Of course," Clara said, smiling gently. Sophie leaned over to hug her mother, then waved at me. "Don't steal Mom away while I'm gone." "Wouldn't dare," I said, though my chest tightened at the words. When the front door shut behind her, silence settled like dust. The kitchen suddenly felt bigger, or maybe emptier. Clara began clearing the dishes. I stood automatically, reaching for the plates. "You don't have to," she said softly. "I want to." Our fingers brushed as I handed her a plate. It was a fleeting touch, nothing more than skin against skin, yet it felt like the air shifted. We both paused. I pretended to focus on the dishes. She pretended not to notice. After a long moment, she broke the silence. "You didn't sleep well, did you?" I hesitated. "No, not really. Thinking about our talk?" I met her gaze. There was no point denying it. "Yeah, it's been a long time since someone listened like that." She looked down, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "Me too." The words hung between us like a secret too delicate to touch. We finished cleaning up in near silence, except for the faint sound of the sink running and the occasional clink of dishes. Every now and then, I felt her presence beside me, quiet, steady, but pulling at something deep inside. When we sat down afterward with fresh cups of tea, neither of us spoke for a while. The ticking of the kitchen clock filled the room. Finally, Clara said, almost in a whisper, "You're very easy to talk to, Elina." I looked up. "So are you." Her eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, neither of us looked away. There was no flirting, no intention, just understanding, deep and wordless. But underneath it all, something dangerous stirred. "I should probably get going soon," I murmured. "Yes," she said softly, though it sounded like she didn't quite mean it. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. Outside, the sky had cleared. The world smelled of wet earth and quiet beginnings. "It was good having you here," she said. "It was good being here," I replied. And it was too good. I turned to go, but before I stepped down the path, she called softly, "Elina?" I turned back, her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Instead, she just smiled faintly, her eyes carrying 1,000 unspoken words. "Take care, dear," she said finally. "You too." And then I walked away. But the farther I went, the more I felt her lingering behind me, in the smell of rain still hanging in the air, in the warmth still trapped in my chest. Days passed, yet the memory refused to fade. I found myself replaying that morning, her calm voice, her smile, the way her hand brushed mine. I told myself it was just a fleeting connection, a trick of loneliness, but my heart didn't believe it. One evening, as I sat by my apartment window watching the sun melt into the city skyline, my phone buzzed. A message from Clara. My heart skipped. "I found your scarf here." The next day, the sky was pale gray, soft, muted, almost hesitant. Just like me. I stood outside Clara's house again, clutching my bag, my breath shallow. The scarf she mentioned was only an excuse. We both knew that. Still, I told myself I was just returning what was lost. When she opened the door, she didn't look surprised. She only smiled. That same quiet, gentle smile that always made me feel like I'd stepped into somewhere safe. "And dangerous, Elina," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth and something else. Something fragile. "Come in." The house smelled the same. Lavender, tea, and faint rain. Only this time it felt emptier. "Sophie went to the city for the weekend," Clara said, almost too casually. "Oh," I managed. And suddenly, that small word held too much meaning. We sat in the kitchen again, 2 cups of tea between us. The clock ticked softly. I could hear my own heartbeat louder than the sound of rain outside. Our conversation began light. Weather, work, the usual pretenses people use when they're trying to avoid the truth. But it didn't last long. Clara looked up, her eyes shimmering in the soft morning light. "I haven't stopped thinking about that night," she said quietly. The words hit me like a breath I'd been holding for too long. Neither of us moved. The steam from her cup rose between us, like a fragile curtain of things unspoken. "I kept hearing your voice in my head," I whispered. That night felt different. Clara nodded slowly, looking down at her hands. "It's been years since I've felt understood by anyone," she said. "And you listened." Her voice trembled at the edges, a melody half broken. I wanted to say something. Anything. But my throat closed up. The silence between us thickened, heavy and alive. When I finally looked up, her eyes met mine, searching, afraid, longing. And for a moment, the world outside disappeared. She reached across the table, not bold, not hurried, just human. Her fingers brushed against mine, soft, uncertain. "Elina," she whispered, "I don't know what this is, but it feels real." Something inside me broke open. All the confusion, the loneliness, the need to be seen. Before I could stop myself, I reached back. Our hands met fully this time. her warmth seeping into my skin, chasing away the cold ache I'd carried for so long. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. No words, no plans, just emotions spilling into the quiet room. The rain outside grew louder, matching the storm inside me. She stood slowly, as if pulled by gravity, and I followed without thinking. For a few seconds, we just looked at each other. Two people caught between right and wrong, between loneliness and longing. Then she whispered, "You should go." But her voice didn't sound like she wanted me to. I took a small step closer, my heart pounding so hard I could barely breathe. She didn't move away, and in that small distance, smaller than air, smaller than a heartbeat, everything changed. Her hand rose, trembling, to my face. Her thumb brushed my cheek as if to memorize it. Her eyes glistened. Tears, maybe. "I don't know what's happening to me," she breathed. "But when you look at me like that, I feel alive again." The words shattered me. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I leaned into her touch, closing my eyes, letting the warmth, the sorrow, the forbidden tenderness sink in. Time blurred. I don't know how long we stayed that way, lost between choices and consequences. When I finally stepped back, my voice was barely a whisper. "We shouldn't have—" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I know," she said softly, "but I haven't felt seen in years." That broke me more than anything else, because I understood. Completely. I took one last look at her, standing in the dim kitchen, her hands trembling slightly, her face both strong and broken. Then I turned to leave. Neither of us said goodbye. Outside, the rain had stopped, but everything still smelled like it had just fallen. New, wet, raw. As I walked away, I could still feel her hand on my cheek, her words echoing in my chest. It wasn't— The days that followed felt like walking through fog. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt the same. I avoided Sophie's calls, avoided the places we used to meet, avoided everything that might lead me back to her house, to her. My phone would light up with Clara's name sometimes, a message, a missed call, but my fingers froze every time. I couldn't bring myself to open them, because I knew that if I heard her voice, even once, I'd break all over again. At night, I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of her whisper. "I don't know what this is, Elina, but it feels real." Those words replayed like an ache that refused to fade. I told myself it was wrong, that it had to fade. But the heart doesn't understand logic. It only remembers warmth. Weeks turned into months, and the world kept moving like nothing had happened. Only I seemed to be stuck, half in the past, half in a silence I didn't know how to escape. Then one afternoon, Sophie showed up at my apartment, cheerful, glowing, the same friend who'd once been my closest comfort. I tried to smile, but my chest tightened the moment I saw her. "Elina!" She laughed, throwing her arms around me. "You've been impossible to reach. What's going on with you lately?" I forced a laugh. "Work, just been busy." It was a lie, of course. The truth was, I'd been hiding. We sat together for an hour, sipping coffee, pretending everything was fine. But then she said something that made my heart stop. "Mom's been different lately," Sophie said quietly. "Different how?" I asked, pretending to sound casual. "I don't know." Quieter. Distant. Like she's carrying something heavy. Her words cut through me like glass. I nodded, swallowing hard, pretending not to understand. But deep down, I knew exactly why Clara had grown quiet. Because I had too. That night, after Sophie left, I sat by my window watching the city lights blur through tears I didn't even realize were falling. I kept wondering if Clara was doing the same, sitting somewhere in that same darkness, thinking about me, and then, as if the universe heard my thoughts, my phone buzzed. A message from her. "Don't hate me. I'm sorry for everything," just 6 words. But they undid me completely. I typed and deleted my reply more times than I could count. First, "I could never hate you." Then, "You don't need to be sorry." Then nothing. because no words felt right anymore. How do you explain to someone that the thing that broke you was also the thing that made you feel alive? The days became quieter after that. No more messages. No more missed calls. Only silence, and the ghost of something too real to name. I threw myself into work, into distraction, into anything that didn't remind me of her. But she was everywhere. In the scent of tea leaves, in the sound of rain, in every late-night silence that felt too heavy to carry alone. Sometimes I'd see mothers and daughters walking together on the street, laughing, talking, normal. And I'd wonder what it would have been like if I'd never crossed that line, if I'd stayed her daughter's friend and not become her secret. But time, cruel as it is, has a way of dulling even the sharpest edges. Months passed. The guilt softened, but the emptiness stayed. I started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. Each brushstroke felt like trying to touch a memory I could never hold again. And in those quiet moments, I realized something. Clara wasn't a mistake. She was a mirror that showed me what love, in its most complicated and painful form, truly meant. To be seen, to be understood, even if only for a moment. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change you forever. I never saw her again after that. Not in person. Not even from afar. But sometimes when the rain falls the way it did that night, I still feel her presence, soft, distant, lingering like a half-remembered song. And in those quiet hours, when the world sleeps, I find myself whispering to the darkness, I hope you're okay. I hope you found peace. Because even if our story ended in silence, it wasn't meaningless. It was a chapter that taught me that love doesn't always mean forever. Time. It moved on, even when my heart didn't. It's been 7 years since that night. The night rain fell against the windows of Clara's house. The night silence spoke louder than words ever could. I live in another city now. A quieter one. A place where people don't know who I used to be. And I don't have to explain the shadows I still carry inside me. I work as a designer in a small studio. Most days are peaceful. Colors, sketches, and long hours by my desk. But sometimes, in between the sound of pencils and paper, I catch myself drifting. Back to that house, that kitchen light, that gentle voice that once said my name like it meant something. It was a rainy evening, much like the one that started it all. When I came home to find an envelope waiting by my door, the handwriting stopped me cold. It was Sophie's. For a moment, I just stood there, watching the rain trace lines down the window, hearing the old ache stir inside me again. I opened it slowly, almost afraid of what might be inside. There was a short note from Sophie. Hi, Elina, I know it's been a long time. Mom talked about you often, even near the end. She always said you were one of the kindest souls she'd ever met. I wanted you to know that she passed away last week after a long illness. While sorting through her things, I found a letter addressed to you. I thought you should have it. Beneath Sophie's note was another envelope. Older, yellowed, sealed carefully, with my name written in soft, familiar cursive. For Elina. My hands trembled. The paper smelled faintly of lavender, the same scent that used to linger on her scarf, on her skin, on every memory that refused to fade. I sat down by the window before opening it, rain tapping softly against the glass. The city outside was blurred, like time itself was holding its breath. When I finally unfolded the paper, her words felt like a whisper from another life. My dear Elina, if you're reading this, it means life has gone on, for both of us. I hope you're smiling more than you used to, and that you found a place where your heart feels safe. I never forgot that night, not for a single day. You reminded me what it meant to feel alive again, what it meant to be seen. You gave warmth to a heart that had forgotten how to beat for someone else. I'm sorry if it hurt you. I never wanted to leave you with pain, only the memory of something pure. If life had been kinder, if time had been fairer, maybe I would have met you in another world. One where age and titles didn't matter. One where love didn't have to hide. But know this, my dear Elina. You were loved. And somewhere, in whatever lies beyond this life. I hope you remember me not for the sorrow, but for the warmth we once shared beneath the sound of the rain. Her signature, Clara, was faint, almost fading into the paper. I held the letter against my chest, feeling my heartbeat stumble, feeling the years between us collapse into a single moment. Tears came before I could stop them. Not loud, not wild, just soft, steady tears that carried every unspoken word I'd kept buried for years. "I loved you too," I whispered, my voice breaking into the rain. The room felt smaller suddenly, the air heavier. Yet inside that weight there was peace, the kind that comes when something finally ends, even if your heart doesn't want it to. I stayed by the window for hours that night, watching the rain fall, the same rhythm that had once brought us together, now carrying her memory back into the world. Each drop felt like a heartbeat, each sound like her voice calling from somewhere beyond time. And as the night deepened, I realized something I'd never dared to before, that maybe some stories aren't meant to have neat endings. Maybe some loves are written in rain to be remembered, not repeated, because love, in its truest form, isn't about forever. It's about impact. It's about one night, one moment, one person who changes you so deeply that the world never looks the same again. Years later, I still keep that letter, folded neatly in the back of an old sketchbook. Sometimes when the rain returns, I take it out, not to cry, but to remember that once I was loved that way. That once there was a woman who saw me, not as a daughter's friend, not as a young girl lost, but as a soul that mirrored her own loneliness. And in that fleeting reflection, we found something worth remembering. The camera of life moves outward now, the rain against the glass, the quiet city lights, the faint sound of wind. Elina stands by the window, older, calmer.
Thank you so much for taking the time to share your thoughts with us. Your feedback is very valuable and will help us improve. May I kindly ask which country you are joining us from?